My name is Margaret Holt. Everyone who knows me calls me Maggie. I am 34 years old, and I am sitting on the edge of a standard issue army cot in a shared room in Wiesbaden, Germany, holding a phone that stopped ringing 11 seconds ago. The number was from Texas, area code 512, Cedar Park. I did not recognize it. It is 11:47 p.m. here. That makes it 4:47 p.m. in Texas, which is a Tuesday afternoon in May, which means whoever called me did so during business hours, from a number I do not have saved, on a day I was not expecting to hear from anyone back home. In my experience, unexpected calls from unknown Texas numbers at the end of a business day mean one of two things. Either something has gone wrong with my paperwork, or something has gone wrong with my family. In my experience, it is usually the family. I looked at the screen for a moment. Then I called the number back. It rang twice. A woman answered. Travis County Title Company, she said. This is Karen. I did not say anything for a second. A title company, not a hospital, not a sheriff's deputy. A title company, which meant this was about the house, which meant tomorrow was happening, which meant my mother and my sister had scheduled the closing on my father's house. The house I grew up in, the house on Briarwood Lane, the house where my father taught me to change a tire in the driveway and where my mother still kept a junk drawer full of things she was never going to use. And they had done it without telling me the date. This is Maggie Holt, I said. You just called me. A pause. Brief. The pause of someone who has been doing this job long enough to recognize a situation that is about to become complicated. Ms. Holt, she said. Thank you for calling back. My name is Karen Delgado. I'm the title specialist handling the closing on 4 Briarwood Lane, Cedar Park. I was doing the final title search this afternoon, and I came across something I need to talk to you about before we proceed tomorrow. I was quiet. Outside the window, Wiesbaden was doing what Wiesbaden did at midnight in May. Cold, quiet, a little rain against the glass, the distant sound of a car on wet pavement. What did you find? I said. Your name, she said. On the deed. I want to tell you something about that moment, because I think the specific quality of it matters. It was not a dramatic moment. I did not gasp. I did not feel a surge of something. What I felt was the very particular stillness that comes when a piece of information arrives that you did not know you were waiting for. The way a key turns in a lock you had forgotten was locked. My name, on the deed. I reached under my cot and pulled out my field bag. The one I keep documents in. The one I have carried through 2 deployments and 1 relocation and a divorce proceeding that lasted 7 months and cost me more than I will say. I unzipped the front pocket. I took out a folded envelope. On the outside, in my father's handwriting, the careful, deliberate print of a man who had been a carpenter for 30 years and who believed that written things should be legible. It said, Topocopias. No. In English, deed copy. I had been carrying that envelope for 3 years without opening it. I opened it. Before I tell you what was inside, before I tell you what Karen Delgado said next, and what happened the following morning when the closing did not close, and what my sister said when she called me 11 minutes after that, I need to take you back. Not far. Just to the place where this actually began, which was not a title company in Round Rock, Texas, and was not a cot in Wiesbaden, Germany. It was a kitchen in Cedar Park. A Skype call. A Tuesday evening in July of 2019. My father's face on a laptop screen, slightly too close to the camera the way he always was. The kitchen behind him familiar enough that I could smell it from 8,000 miles away. Coffee. Dish soap. The particular wood smell of the cabinets my father had built himself in 1999. If you have ever had to say goodbye to someone through a screen, if you have ever tried to fit a real conversation into a pixelated rectangle with a 2-second delay, then you know something about what those calls were like. If you have ever been the one who chose to leave and had to keep explaining that choice to people who loved you and did not understand it, you know the rest. I joined the army at 22. My mother thought it was a phase. My sister Diane thought it was a mistake. which she said once directly, and then communicated indefinitely through the particular tone she used when she talked about my career. Not unkind, exactly, just carefully distanced, the way you talk about a relative's choices when you have decided the choices are not your responsibility to understand. My father never said either of those things. He was the one who drove me to the recruiter's office on a Wednesday morning in March of 2012, because I did not own a car and the bus would have taken 40 minutes. He sat in the parking lot and read a Tom Clancy novel while I was inside for 2 hours. When I came out with the paperwork, he looked up from the book and said, "Well, I signed," I said. He nodded. He put the bookmark in. He started the car. "Good," he said. That was it, no speech, no concern, no carefully worded reservation, just good. The word of a man who trusted his daughter's judgment, because he had watched her exercise it for 22 years and had found it to be sound. I have been trying to explain to my mother and my sister for 12 years that this is what I was trying to get back to every time I enlisted. Not the army specifically. Not the deployment, not the uniform, not the 14-hour workdays in buildings without reliable air conditioning. What I was trying to get back to was that feeling. The feeling of being trusted to know what you were doing. The feeling of a decision being met with good. The July 2019 Skype call was 3 months before my second deployment. I was processing out of Fort Hood, handling paperwork, trying to organize 12 months of absence into a weekend of decisions. My father called on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual. He was not a caller. He was an emailer. He communicated in short factual sentences and occasional photographs of things he had built or repaired. A call meant something specific. His face on the screen was thinner than I remembered from Christmas. Not alarmingly thin, just the gradual thinning of a man in his mid-60s who had spent 40 years doing physical work and whose body was beginning to reflect that honestly. His hair was completely white by then. He had grown a beard at some point in the previous year, short and neat, which I had not seen in person yet and which made him look, I thought, like a retired professor rather than a retired carpenter. "You look tired," he said. "It's 9 o'clock at night," I said. "I know what time it is." He adjusted the laptop. "I need to tell you something." I waited. He said, "I went to the county recorder's office last week. I added your name to the deed on the house." I looked at him. "What?" "The house. Briarwood Lane. I put your name on it. You're a co-owner now." He said it the way he said most things. Plainly, without preamble. As if he were telling me he had replaced the water heater. "I should have done it a long time ago. I wanted to make sure it was done before you left." I did not know what to say. Not because I was moved, but because I was trying to understand what he was telling me and why. "Dad." "Why?" He was quiet for a moment. He looked at something off screen. The window. I think. The one over the kitchen sink that looked out onto the backyard, where he had built a deck in 2003 that had held up for 20 years because he had used the right wood and taken his time. "You've been gone a lot," he said. "And while you've been gone, things get decided. About the house. About other things. I want there to be a record that says you're part of this too." He looked back at the camera. "That's all. I want to tell you that I said something meaningful in response. That I found the right words for what that sentence meant, for what it meant that my father had gone to a government office on a Tuesday and added my name to a legal document, without being asked, without telling anyone, without making it a conversation. I want to tell you that I said something that matched the size of what he had done." I did not. I said, "Okay, Dad, thank you." He said, "Be safe over there." The call ended. I did not think about the deed again for almost 3 years. Not consciously. It existed in the way that certain things exist when you are living a life that requires full attention in the present tense. In the background, filed away. Neither urgent nor forgotten. I knew my name was on a document in Travis County. I did not know what that would mean. I did not think about what it would mean. I was 20, 9 years old, and I was about to deploy, and I had approximately 900 other things requiring my attention. My father died on March 4th, 2021. I was in Kabul. My commanding officer called me into his office on a Thursday morning and told me. He was a decent man. He said what needed to be said, and then he gave me 45 minutes alone in the office, which was the right thing to do, and which I have not forgotten. I did not cry in that office. I sat in the chair and looked at the wall and thought about the Skype call in 2019, about the white beard, about the window over the kitchen sink, about a Tom Clancy novel and a parking lot, and the word good. The army gave me emergency leave. I got a flight from Bagram to Dubai to Frankfurt to Houston. 31 hours. I arrived in Cedar Park on March 8th, 4 days after my father died. The funeral had been on March 6th. I had missed it by 2 days. My mother met me at the door. She hugged me for a long time and said nothing, which was more than I had expected and exactly what I needed. Diane was in the kitchen making coffee. She hugged me too, briefly, and said, "We didn't know if you'd make it." "I came as fast as I could," I said. "I know," she said. "It's fine." It was not fine. But I understood that fine was the word we were going to use, because using the accurate word would require us to sit with something none of us were ready to sit with, which was the fact that Walter Holt had been buried without his younger daughter present, and that this was the direct consequence of a choice I had made 12 years ago that his wife and older daughter had never entirely forgiven me for, even when they were too kind to say so directly. I stayed for 9 days. I helped my mother go through my father's things. I sorted the garage, which took 2 days, and which was the closest I came to crying, because the garage was full of the specific evidence of my father's life. Hand tools organized by size and type on pegboard he had installed himself. A coffee can full of screws sorted by diameter. A spiral notebook on the workbench with measurements for a bookshelf he had been planning to build for a neighbor and would never finish. On the 7th day, I went through the desk in the study. My father's desk, an old oak thing he had bought at an estate sale in 1994, solid and heavy and scratched in ways that told you it had been used. Second drawer on the right. Inside it a folder labeled documents. Inside the folder, insurance papers, the car title, their marriage certificate, and an envelope. The envelope had my name on it, his handwriting. I picked it up. I turned it over. On the back in the same careful print deed copy, Margaret Ellen Holt, co-owner, 4 Briarwood Lane, Cedar Park, TX 786015. Recorded August 7, 2019, Travis County Note 19 TRO 471. I held it for a moment, then I put it in my bag. Not the folder, my bag. My personal bag, the one I was taking back to Kabul. I do not know exactly why. Instinct, maybe. The same instinct that makes you keep certain things close, without being able to articulate why they need to be close. I left Cedar Park on March 17th. I flew back to Kabul. I did not tell my mother or Diane about the envelope. It did not occur to me as something that needed to be told. My name was on the deed. My father had put it there. That was a fact that existed whether anyone knew it or not. Facts are like that. They do not require acknowledgement. They just require a moment when someone finally looks. Karen Delgado had looked. Back in Wiesbaden, on my cot, at 11:47 p.m. I spread the deed copy on my knee. The paper was stiff from being folded for 3 years. I smoothed it flat with the heel of my hand. In the cone of light from the desk lamp, I read my own name in the official typeface of a government document, Margaret Ellen Holt. Co-owner. Recorded August 7, 2019. My father had been dead for 3 years and 2 months. In that time, his wife had stopped sleeping on his side of the bed, started sleeping there, and then sold the bed. His tools had been given to a neighbor. His clothes had gone to Goodwill. His truck had been sold to a man from Round Rock for $14,000, which was fair market value, and which my mother did not tell me about until after the fact. And now his house was scheduled to close tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock Central Time. $472,000, split between his wife and his older daughter, who had organized and managed and administered everything that needed organizing and managing and administering in the 38 months since he died. While his younger daughter was in Germany. While his younger daughter was, as always, somewhere else. I looked at my name on the document for a long time. Karen Delgado was still on the phone. I had almost Ms. Holt, she said. I'm here, I said. I need you to understand that without your authorization, we cannot proceed with the closing tomorrow, she said. Your signature is required on the deed of sale. You are a co-owner of record. That is not something we can work around. Outside, the rain had picked up. I could hear it against the window now, steady and even. One of my bunkmates turned over in her sleep across the room. The bass was quiet the way basses are quiet at midnight, not peaceful exactly, just temporarily still. I understand, I said. Is there anything you'd like me to tell the parties when I contact them in the morning? I thought about my mother. I thought about Diane. I thought about Glenn Carver, my brother-in-law, who was an MLACNA and who would be losing a $22,000 commission tomorrow morning when Karen Delgado made her call. I thought about my father, standing at a counter at the Travis County Recorder's office in August of 2019, asking a clerk to add his daughter's name to a deed, doing it quietly, doing it without telling anyone, doing it because he understood, in the way that he understood most things, that love is not enough on its own, that sometimes love needs to also be a document, filed, notarized. Tell them I'll need some time, I said. I hung up. I set the deed copy on the cot beside me. I looked at it for a long moment, at my father's signature on the second page, at the recorder's stamp in the corner, at my own name in government typeface that would not move or qualify itself or apologize for existing. I thought, he knew. He knew this moment might come. Not this specific moment, not this phone call, not Wiesbaden and a rainy Tuesday midnight, but a moment when the record would matter, when the paper would say something that the room was trying not to say. He had not built me a shelter, or left me money, or written me a letter. He had done something quieter than any of those things. He had put my name on a document, and then he had let the document wait. I turned off the desk lamp. I lay back on the cot. The rain was steady against the window. Somewhere on the base a door opened and closed. I did not sleep for a long time. Not because I was angry. Not yet. Not because I was planning anything. Just because I was lying there in the dark with the understanding that tomorrow morning, in Cedar Park, Texas, at 10 o'clock Central Time, a closing was not going to close. And for the first time in a very long time, the most important thing in the room was my name. The first thing Diane said to me after our father's funeral was, "You should have found a way to be here." Not hello. Not I'm glad you made it. Not even the neutral, functional greeting of two people who are grieving the same person and have decided, by unspoken agreement, to be civil about it. Just, "You should have found a way to be here." Said in the kitchen of the Briarwood Lane house, over a pot of coffee, 4 days after the burial, while I was still wearing the clothes I had traveled in for 31 hours because my bag had not arrived with my flight and was somewhere between Frankfurt and Houston, being located by a baggage claim representative named Curtis, who had assured me it would be delivered by Thursday. I looked at my sister. She was standing at the counter with her back to me, pouring coffee into a mug that said "World's Best Grandpa," which had been a gift from someone and which my father had used every morning for 6 years without irony. "I came as fast as I could," I said. "I was in Kabul." "I know where you were," she said. She handed me a mug. A different one, a plain white one, and turned back to the counter. The conversation was over. That was the thing about Diane. She did not fight. She stated, and then she moved on. And the statement sat in the room like furniture you had to navigate around. I drank my coffee. I did not say, I requested emergency leave the same hour I was notified. I did not say I sat on 3 planes for 31 hours to get here. I did not say, I missed my father's funeral by 47 hours, and I will carry that for the rest of my life, without anyone needing to remind me. I did not say any of those things. because saying them would have made it a competition. And a competition about grief is a thing nobody wins and everybody loses differently. So I drank my coffee. And I noted the sentence. The way I had been trained to note things, not with reaction, just with registration. Filed. Stored. Because in my experience, the first sentence someone says to you, after a long absence, tells you more about the intervening time than anything they say afterward. You should have found a way to be here. What it meant, translated: while you were gone, we managed everything. While you were gone, we sat with him. While you were gone, we made the decisions. While you were gone, the family happened without you. And now you are back, and you are late. And the shape of your absence has already been filled in by the people who stayed. I understood all of that. I even understood it charitably. Diane had done real things. She had been present in ways I had not been able to be. She had managed my mother through the worst months of her life, had handled the medical appointments and the hospice coordination, and the paperwork that follows a death in ways that are invisible until you are the one doing them. I did not diminish any of that. But there is a difference between doing the work and owning the room. Diane had done the work. And in doing it, she had, gradually, come to own the room. All the rooms. The house, the decisions, the narrative of what our family was, and what it needed, and what would happen next. By the time I arrived in Cedar Park in March of 2021, the shape of things had already been decided. I was a visitor in a structure that had been built while I was away, and the structure had not left a space for me. That was the first scene. Here is what the accumulation looked like after that. It looked like a phone call in September of 2021, 6 months after the funeral. I was back at Fort Hood by then, in a relatively stable rotation, which meant I had enough bandwidth to call home regularly. I called my mother on a Sunday. She answered on the second ring, which was unusual. She was a third ring person. She always let it ring twice before picking up, as if she needed a moment to prepare. "I have news," she said. I waited. "We're going through your father's things." "The workshop." "Diane thinks it's time." I had been to the workshop once since the funeral. My father's workshop was in the backyard, a separate structure he had built in 2007, 12 by 16 feet, insulated, with a proper electrical panel, and a workbench that ran the full length of the north wall. He had spent every Saturday morning of my childhood in that workshop. It smelled like sawdust and linseed oil and the specific metallic smell of tools that have been used and cleaned and used again for decades. It was, in a way that I did not have precise language for, the most Walter Holt place on earth. "Okay," I said. "What are you doing with the tools?" "Diane found a buyer," my mother said. "A man from the woodworking club your father used to go to. He's gonna take the large equipment. The table saw and the band saw and the drill press." I was quiet for a moment. "Was there anything you wanted?" my mother asked. Not as a sincere offer. Or maybe it was sincere, and it just landed wrong through the phone. The way things sometimes do. But the timing of the question, coming after the decision had already been made, and the buyer had already been found, made it feel less like an invitation and more like a formality. "The hand planes," I said. He had 3 of them, the old ones, the Stanley planes. "I'd like those." "I'll tell Diane," my mother said. She told Diane. Diane told the man from the woodworking club. The man from the woodworking club took the Stanley planes with the table saw and the band saw and the drill press in a truck on a Saturday morning in October. My mother called to tell me after the fact. She was sorry, she said. It had been a miscommunication. She thought I had meant the power tools. I had not meant the power tools. I said it's okay, which was not true. But the accurate thing to say was not something I was willing to spend on a phone call about hand planes, because the hand planes were not the point. The point was the structure. The way decisions were being made, and who was making them, and who was being informed afterward, rather than consulted before. The point was that the question was not really what do you want, it was do you want anything before we do what we've already decided, and the answer was expected to be no, or at least nothing that complicates things. The second scene happened in February of 2022, 11 months after the funeral. I was on a Thursday evening video call with my mother. A regular thing we had established, every other Thursday, which was an improvement on the previous arrangement of irregular calls that happened when one of us remembered and the other was available. My mother was in the living room of the Briarwood Lane house. I could see the couch behind her, the one my parents had bought in 2008, and the lamp on the end table that had a slightly bent shade from the time my father had knocked it with a ladder in 2015, and my mother had never replaced it because she said it still worked fine. Diane is thinking about the house. My mother said. I waited. Long term. What we do with it. She thinks. And I think she's right. That it's a lot of house for just me. The yard alone. Your father always did the yard. I can help with the yard, I said. When I'm back. My mother looked at something off screen. You're not back very often. Maggie, I know. But I'm not gone forever. She nodded, the particular nod of someone who has decided not to say what they are thinking. Diane is looking into some options. Just preliminary. Nothing decided? I want to tell you what I should have said in that moment. I should have said, what kind of options? I should have said I'd like to be part of that conversation. I should have said, this is Dad's house and I'd like to understand what's being considered before anything moves forward. I did not say any of those things. I said okay, one word. The same word I said to my father in 2019 when he told me he had added my name to the deed. And the same word I said to my mother in 2021 when she told me the hand planes were gone. And the same word I said every time the family made a decision without me, and then mentioned it afterward as a courtesy. Okay. The word of someone who has decided, whether consciously or not, that this particular battle is not worth the cost of fighting it at this particular moment. I was wrong about that. But I did not know it yet. The third scene was a WhatsApp exchange, March 3rd, 2023, 2 years after the funeral. I know the date because I keep the screenshot, not because I anticipated needing it, but because I was in the habit of keeping records of things that felt wrong even when I could not yet articulate why they felt wrong. Military intelligence had taught me that much, at least. You document what seems significant. You do not always know what is significant in real time. You know it later. The message was from Diane. It was in our family group chat, which also included my mother and my Aunt Carol, who lived in San Antonio and who participated in family group chats the way some people participate in work meetings. Technically present. Minimally engaged. The message said, Mom and I have been talking, and we think it's time to seriously consider selling the house. The market in Cedar Park is strong right now, and Glenn has done some comps. We're going to talk to a realtor this week. Just wanted to keep everyone in the loop. I read it twice. Just wanted to keep everyone in the loop. Not, we'd like your input. Not, let's discuss this as a family. Not, Maggie, you grew up here too. What do you think? Just, we've already talked. We've already done the research. Glenn has done the comps. We are informing you that this is happening. I looked at the message for a long time. I thought about what to say. I cycled through several things. I typed I'd like to be part of this conversation before anything is decided. I looked at that sentence for 40 seconds. Then I deleted it. I typed can we get on a call this week? I looked at that for 20 seconds. Then I deleted it. I typed okay. I sent it. Aunt Carol sent a thumbs up emoji. My mother sent a heart. I put my phone down and went back to the intelligence report I had been reading before the notification came through. It was a 17-page document about regional infrastructure vulnerabilities, and it required my full attention, which I gave it. Because the report was in front of me, and the house was 4,000 miles away, and there was nothing useful I could do about either of those facts in the next 4 hours. But I kept the screenshot. Because something in the structure of that message, the specific phrasing, the way it was presented as information rather than invitation, the quiet assumption that the decision had already been made, and the group chat was simply the delivery mechanism. Sat wrong in a way I could not yet name. And things that sit wrong in a way you cannot name are worth keeping. Here is what I understood, by the spring of 2023, about my place in my own family. I want to be precise about this, because imprecision is how you end up carrying something for years without being able to set it down. I was loved. I am confident of that. My mother loved me in the way that parents love children who chose a life they cannot entirely follow. With genuine warmth and a persistent, low-grade incomprehension that expressed itself as well, meaning irrelevance. She sent me packages. She remembered my birthday. She asked about my work in the general, careful way of someone who understands they do not have the vocabulary for the specifics. She loved me the way you love someone whose life happens, mostly off-screen. Diane loved me the way older sisters love younger sisters who did not do things the expected way. With a complicated mixture of genuine affection and the standing position that she had been right about certain things, and I had been wrong, and that the evidence continued to accumulate in her favor. She was not cruel. She was not vindictive. She was, in the specific way of competent people who have been managing a situation for a long time, simply confident that her judgment was correct and that consultation was a courtesy rather than a requirement. What I was not, in this family's operating structure, was a decision maker. I was a recipient of decisions, a person to be kept in the loop, an overseas variable that complicated things when considered too closely and was therefore considered at a comfortable distance. Acknowledged, included in group chats, and then gently set aside while the actual decisions got made by the people who were present. I had allowed this. I want to be accurate about that. Not because I was weak, but because I had decided, for years, that the cost of asserting myself was higher than the cost of absorbing the decisions. That the distance between Cedar Park and wherever I was on a given Tuesday was distance I had chosen, and that choosing it meant accepting certain consequences, and that one of those consequences was that things would happen at home without my input. What I had not calculated, because I did not know there was anything to calculate, was the deed. My father had calculated it for me. He had sat at a counter in a government office in August of 2019 and made a unilateral decision of his own. Not to consult, not to discuss, not to keep anyone in the loop. Just to act. To put my name on a document and file it and let it exist. The way he built things. Quietly, correctly, without requiring an audience. By the time the spring of 2023 had turned into the fall of 2023, the house was on the market. Glenn had done the comps and found the listing price and put up the sign and taken the photographs. $495,000. The listing went up on a Tuesday. My mother texted me a Zillow link. I clicked it. I looked at the photographs. The kitchen, my father's cabinets, still there, still solid, the wood darker now with 25 years of use. The backyard where the workshop used to be. Cleared now, just grass. No trace of the structure my father had built with his own hands on 4 consecutive Saturdays in October of 2007. The driveway where he had taught me to change a tire. The front porch where he had sat every evening in the summer with a glass of iced tea and read until it got dark. I looked at the photographs for a long time. Then I closed the app and went back to work. The listing sat for 6 months. Cedar Park was strong, but not as strong as Glenn had told them. The rate environment had shifted, buyers were cautious. $495 was slightly above what the market wanted to pay for a 3-bedroom on 1 acre in that specific part of town. They dropped the price to $479 in October, then to $472 in January of 2024. The Okeffers made an offer in February. My mother texted me, "We have an offer. It looks good. Closing should be in May." I typed, "Okay." I sent it. And then I sat with what I had been sitting with for 3 years. The feeling of watching something happen from the wrong side of 4,000 miles of ocean and time zone, and the specific remove that comes with having chosen a life that placed you, repeatedly, in rooms where the decisions were not about your family's house in Cedar Park. The feeling of being kept in the loop about your own inheritance. The feeling of okay, sent again, one more time, into the group chat. But something was different that February. Because in my bag, in the front pocket with the documents, there was still an envelope. My father's handwriting. Government typeface inside. August 7th, 2019. I had not taken it out since the night I found it in the desk drawer in March of 2021. But I had not thrown it away. I had not left it behind. I had carried it through 2 countries, and 3 duty stations, and 1 relocation, and 1 divorce and more time zones than I could readily count. I had been carrying it without knowing why. In February of 2024, sitting on my cot in Wiesbaden with my mother's text on the screen, I began to understand why. Not fully. Not yet. But the shape of it was beginning to come clear. The way shapes come clear in low light, when you stop trying to look directly at them and let your peripheral vision do the work instead. Something about the envelope. Something about August 7th, 2019. Something about a man who built things correctly and quietly, and who had gone to a government office 3 months before his daughter's second deployment and done something that no one knew about. He had known it might matter. He had just not said so. I put the phone down. I looked at the front pocket of my bag. The closing was scheduled for May. It was February. I had time. Not to plan anything dramatic. Not to make a scene. Just to understand completely what I was holding, and what holding it meant, and what happened next when you stopped sending okay into a group chat and let the document do the talking instead. My father had been patient his whole life. He had built things that lasted, because he had taken the time to build them right. He had not raised his voice that I could remember. He had not won arguments by force. He had won them, when he won them, by being correct, and by having done the work beforehand to make sure that when the moment came, the record was in order. I came from him. I had just forgotten it for a while. I was starting to remember. The message came on a Wednesday morning, March 6th, 2024. 3 years to the day since my father's funeral. I know it was 3 years to the day, because I had been aware of the date since I woke up. Not in a planned way. Not with intention. Just the way certain dates arrive in the body, before the mind catches up. March 6th. The day we put Walter Holt in the ground, without his younger daughter present. The day I had been reconstructing in my imagination, in pieces and fragments, for 36 months. I was in the motor pool at 7 in the morning, doing a pre-operation check on a vehicle that needed to be signed out by 9. The work was physical and routine, and required just enough attention to keep the mind from wandering too far, which was exactly the kind of work I needed on a March 6th. Hands on something real. Eyes on something specific. The particular discipline of a task that has a defined beginning and a defined end, and a checklist that tells you when you are finished. My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I checked it between checklist items, which I would not normally do, but it was a family group chat notification, and family group chat notifications on March 6th felt like something I should not ignore. The message was from my mother. It said, "Girls, just wanted to say I'm thinking of Dad today. 3 years. Miss him every day." Also, Glenn heard back from the title company. Closing date is confirmed May 14th. Feels like things are finally moving forward. Love you both. I read it twice. I want to tell you about the specific experience of reading those 2 sentences in the same message. The first sentence was grief. Honest and plain, the kind of grief that has no agenda and needs no response beyond acknowledgement. My mother missed her husband. 3 years had not made that smaller. I understood this completely and felt it alongside her without distance. The second sentence was something else. May 14th, closing confirmed. Things are finally moving forward, on March 6th, in the same message. I stood in the motor pool with a checklist in one hand and my phone in the other, and I thought about what it meant that my mother had put those 2 things in the same text. I do not think she meant it as a statement. I do not think she understood that she was saying, "We are moving on from your father. And the evidence is that we have confirmed a date to sell the house he built his life in." I think she was simply reporting two things that were true, in the order they occurred to her, the way people do when they are not thinking about how the order might land. But the order landed. Things are finally moving forward. I put the phone back in my pocket. I finished the checklist. I signed out the vehicle. I drove it to the lot where it needed to be and parked it, and walked back across the base in the March cold, which in Wiesbaden in early spring is a specific kind of cold. Not brutal, just gray and persistent. The cold of a place that is not quite done with winter, and is not in any hurry to decide. I did not respond to the message. That evening, I took the envelope out of my bag. I had been circling it for weeks. Since February, since my mother's text about the Okafor offer, I had been aware of it in a way I had not been before. Not quite avoiding it, not quite ready to open it. The way you are sometimes aware of a conversation you know you need to have, but have not yet found the right beginning for. The envelope sat in the front pocket of my field bag, and I sat in Wiesbaden, and we had an arrangement that suited us both. For the time being, March 6th ended the arrangement. I sat on my cot. My bunkmates were at dinner. The room was quiet. Just the sound of the bass outside the window, and the particular hum of military housing heating systems that sound the same everywhere in the world. I took the envelope out. I set it on my knee. I looked at my father's handwriting on the outside. The careful, deliberate print of a man who believed that written things should be legible. Deed copy. Margaret Ellen Holt, co. Owner, 4 Briarwood Lane, TX 78615, recorded August 7, 2019, Travis County No. 2019 TRLO 4471. I had read those words before. I had read them the day I found the envelope in the desk drawer in March of 2021. In the 9 days I spent in Cedar Park after missing the funeral. I had read them, and registered them, and put the envelope in my bag, and flown back to Kabul, and filed the information in the category of things that were real, but not yet relevant. I opened the envelope properly this time. Not the quick, distracted opening of a person who is processing too many things at once. Deliberately. The way my father would have opened it. Taking his time, not tearing anything. I unfolded the 2 pages inside, and smoothed them flat on my knee the way I had done in November, when Karen Delgado called. But this time there was no one on the phone, no confirmation being sought, no deadline in 13 hours. Just me and the document and the room. The first page was the property description. 4 Briarwood Lane, Cedar Park, Travis County, Texas. Legal description, lot dimensions, parcel number. The kind of information that is precise and dry, and tells you everything about a piece of land, except what it felt like to grow up on it. The second page was the ownership record. I read it slowly. Grantor Walter James Holt, a married man acting as his sole and separate property. Grantee Walter James Holt and Margaret Ellen Holt, as joint tenants with right of survivorship. I stopped at that phrase. Joint tenants with right of survivorship. I had a basic understanding of property law from a JG briefing I had sat through in 2018 that covered estate planning for deployed service members. Joint tenancy with right of survivorship meant that when one owner died, the property passed automatically to the surviving owner. Not through a will, not through prodigy. By operation of law, Walter James Holt had died on March 4, 2021, which meant that on March 4, 2021, by operation of law, the property at 4 Briarwood Lane had passed in its entirety to Margaret Ellen Holt. Not to his wife. Not to his estate. Not to be divided according to any will, or any family agreement, or any decision made by any person in any kitchen over any cup of coffee in a mug that said "World's Best Grandpa." To me, I sat with that for a very long time. The heating system hummed. Outside, someone crossed the parking lot, boots on wet asphalt, fading. A door opened somewhere down the hall and closed. I read the second page again. Then again. I am trained to read documents carefully. To resist the impulse to accept a first reading as complete. To look for the thing the document is actually saying underneath the thing it appears to be saying. I read it a third time. It said the same thing each time. Walter James Holt had created a joint tenancy with right of survivorship in August of 2019. He had done it properly, With a licensed attorney, the document bore a notary seal and an attorney's certificate of preparation, 1 Gerald R. Finch, Cedar Park, Texas. He had recorded it at the Travis County Recorder's Office. He had done everything correctly. And then he had died, and I had become the sole owner of 4 Briarwood Lane, without knowing it, without anyone knowing it. For 36 months, while my mother had been living in a house she no longer legally owned, and my sister had been making decisions about a property she had no legal authority over, and Glenn had been calculating commissions on a sale that could not legally proceed without my signature. For all of that time, the document had been sitting in a filing system at the Travis County Recorder's Office, waiting. My father had not told me because, and I understood this now, sitting on the cot in Wiesbaden, with a clarity that felt less like revelation and more like recognition. He had not needed to. He had done the legal work. The legal work did not require my knowledge to be effective. He had not wanted to make it a conversation. He had not wanted to create a family argument, or a confrontation, or a dynamic where Diane felt she needed to weigh in, or my mother felt caught between her children. He had just wanted it done. Correctly. Quietly. In a way that would hold up when it needed to hold up. He had trusted the document to do what documents do, speak when spoken to. I put the pages back in the envelope. I set the envelope on the cot beside me. I looked at the wall of the room for a while. I thought about the last 3 years. About you should have found a way to be here. About the hand planes going to the man from the woodworking club. About just wanted to keep everyone in the loop, and Glenn has done the comps and things are finally moving forward. About 6 months of okay, sent into a group chat, absorbed and noted and filed and never quite resolved. I thought about May 14th. 10 weeks away. I thought about what it meant that a closing had been scheduled on a property that could not legally close without my signature. And that neither my mother, nor my sister, nor Glenn Carver, nor the listing agent, nor look at involved in this transaction, looked at the deed closely enough to find my name, untitled, specialist named Karen Deller, job Gadato, had done her job correctly 8 months later. I thought about what I was going to do. And here is what I want to tell you about that moment, because I think it is the most important moment in this story. More important than the phone call, and more important than the closing that did not close, and more important than anything that came after. I was not angry. I want to be precise about this because the difference matters. I was not the person you imagine. When you imagine someone who has just discovered that their family has been attempting to sell their property without their knowledge, I was not burning. I was not rehearsing speeches. I was not thinking about what I was going to say to Diane, or how I was going to make my mother understand, or what Glenn's face was going to look like when someone explained the situation to him. What I was, sitting on that cot at 9:47 in the evening on March 6, 2024, was clear, not certain of what to do yet, but clear about what was true. And in my experience, in 12 years of military intelligence work, in 12 years of sorting what is real from what is noise, clarity is the thing that precedes every correct decision. You do not act from confusion. You do not act from anger. You act from clarity when you have assembled enough of it, and not before. I was not ready to act yet, but I was clear. I picked up my phone. I opened the family group chat. I looked at my mother's message from that morning. Thinking of Dad today, closing confirmed. Things are finally moving forward. Love you both. I looked at the heart that Diane had sent in response. I looked at my own response, which was a heart too. Sent at 7:20, 3 in the morning from the motor pool, before I had read the document, before I understood what I was holding. I did not send anything now. I put the phone face down on the cot. I picked up the envelope. I put it back in the front pocket of my field bag. I zipped it closed. Then I did something I had not done in a long time, not on any March 6th, not in any year since 2021. I let myself think about the funeral I had missed. Not with guilt. I had processed the guilt, or as much of it as can be processed. in the months and years after, but as a fact, as a specific, irreducible fact about my life, I had not been there. My father had been buried and I had not been there, and the family had moved forward from that day in ways that had, gradually, accumulated into a structure that left less and less space for the daughter who was not there. I thought about that structure, about how it had been built, piece by piece, in the 3 years since March 6, 2021. About the first sentence Diane had said to me when I arrived. About the hand planes. About the Zillow link. About things are finally moving forward. I thought about my father, standing at a counter in Travis County in August of 2019, adding my name to a deed. He had built a counter structure. Quietly, in advance, with the same care he brought to everything he built. He had not known exactly what it would be needed for. He had just known that it might be needed. That his younger daughter, who had chosen a life that placed her repeatedly at a distance, might one day find herself on the outside of a decision that should have included her. And he had made sure, in the only way available to him, that the record said otherwise. He had loved me in the language he knew best. Legal documents, filed correctly, held until needed. The question now was what to do with what he had left me. Not what to take, not what to claim. Those were the wrong questions, and I knew they were the wrong questions. And the fact that I knew this was perhaps the most important thing I had learned in 12 years of military service. That the first framing of a situation is rarely the correct framing, and that acting on the first framing is how people make mistakes they spend years undoing. The right question was simpler than that. What does this situation actually require? I sat with that question for a long time. Long enough that my bunkmates came back from dinner. And the room got louder, and I moved to the common area down the hall, and sat there instead, in a plastic chair, under a fluorescent light, with my field bag on my lap, and the document inside it, and 10 weeks, until a closing that was not going to close. What does this situation actually require? Not a confrontation. Not a declaration. Not a speech in a kitchen about hand planes and group chats. And you should have found a way to be here. What it required was the same thing every complex situation required: the right person, with the right information, at the right time. I knew the right information. I had it in my bag. I needed the right person. I pulled out my phone. I opened a browser. I searched for 3 words: J.G. Fort Wiesbaden, Judge Advocate General's Corps, Military Legal Services, available to every active duty service member at no cost. I had used them once before, for the divorce, and the officer I had worked with had been direct and competent, and had not wasted my time. The office opened at 8 in the morning. It was 9:53 p.m. I set an alarm for 7:45. I went to bed. I did not sleep immediately. I lay in the dark for a while, listening to the bass sounds. The distant machinery, the occasional vehicle. The specific white noise of a place that never fully goes quiet. My bunkmate across the room was already asleep. Through the window, Wiesbaden was dark and cold and indifferent, the way cities are indifferent at night. Just existing without caring about any particular thing happening inside any particular room. I thought about the last thing my father said to me on that Skype call in July of 2019. Be safe over there. Not I put your name on the deed. Not I need to tell you something important about the house. Not one day this might matter, and when it does, the document will be in the second drawer of the oak desk in the study. Just be safe over there. Because he had already done what needed doing. The document was filed. The record was correct. The rest. The when and the how and the whether, and the what it would mean. All of that was not his to manage. He had built the thing. He had put it in the right place. The rest was up to the situation, and to me, and to a title specialist named Karen Delgado, who would do her job correctly on a Thursday afternoon 8 months after he was gone and find a name on a deed that no one had looked for. He had trusted the system to work. He had trusted me to know what to do when it did. I closed my eyes. 7:45. JAG office. 8 o'clock. I had 10 weeks, and I had a document, And I had 12 years of training in the specific discipline of waiting until you understand the full situation before you act. My father had waited longer than that. He had waited his whole life to build things right. The least I could do was take 10 weeks. The JAG office at Wiesbaden was in a low building on the east side of the base, between the Legal Assistance Office and the Claims Processing Center, in the particular architectural style of American military facilities everywhere in the world. Functional, beige, apologetically permanent. I had been there once before, 2 years ago, for the divorce. The waiting area had the same 3 chairs, the same table with outdated magazines, the same framed copy of the Soldier's Creed on the wall that someone had hung slightly crooked, and no one had corrected. I arrived at 7:52 on the morning of March 7th, 2024, 8 minutes before opening. A specialist at the front desk was unlocking the interior door when I walked in. She looked at me, looked at the clock, and said, "We'll open at 8. I said, "I'll wait." I sat in one of the 3 chairs. I had my field bag on my lap. Inside it, in the front pocket, the envelope. I had also printed 2 documents the night before at the base business center. A summary of Texas joint tenancy law that I had assembled from 3 different legal reference sources, and the Zillow listing for 4 Briarwood Lane, Cedar Park, which showed the property as contingent as of February 28, 2024. I had put both of those in the envelope with the deed copy. Not because I needed them. A JEG officer would be able to find everything relevant. But because I had been trained to arrive prepared. You do not walk into a briefing and ask the room to catch you up. You do your homework first, and then you use the briefing to confirm and extend what you already know. At exactly 8 o'clock, a door opened and a woman came out. She was in her mid-30s, I thought. Captain's bars. Dark hair pulled back. She moved with the particular economy of someone who had a lot of work and had made peace with that. She looked at me with a brief, assessing expression. The expression of someone who can usually tell, in a few seconds, what category of problem has walked through the door. "Staff Sergeant Holt," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "Captain Priya Nair." She extended her hand. "Come on back." Her office was small and orderly. 1 window. A desk with 2 monitors, and a stack of files that had the organized disorder of active work rather than neglect. A whiteboard on the wall with 3 case references written in blue marker and partially erased. A framed photograph on the desk that I could not see from where I sat. She gestured to the chair across from her desk and sat down herself and opened a legal pad. "Tell me what you have," she said. I told her. I did not start with the group chat or the hand planes, or you should have found a way to be here. I started with August 7th, 2019. The Skype call, what my father said, what I understood and did not understand at the time. Then the death, March 4th, 2021. The envelope in the desk drawer, found March 9th. The deployment, the return, the 3 years of decisions made without my input. The OK for offer, February 2024. The Zillow listing. The confirmed closing date, May 14th, 2024. And then the document, which I took out of the envelope and placed on her desk. She picked it up. She read it the way lawyers read things. Not quickly, not performing speed, just actually reading. She turned to the second page. She found the phrase. She set the document down. "Joint tenancy with right of survivorship," she said. "Yes, your father created this in 2019, August 7th, and he died in 2021, March 4th. She wrote something on her legal pad. "Have you spoken to anyone in your family about this document?" "None." "Does anyone in your family know this document exists?" "My father knew. He created it. As far as I can tell, no one else." She nodded. She wrote something else. "The listing agent. Do you know if they did a title search before listing?" "I don't know. The listing went up in fall of 2023. Glenn Carver. He's my brother. In-law. He's a realtor. He handled it. The title company is Travis County Title Company in Round Rock. The title company will have done a search. Or they should have." She paused. "If they searched correctly and missed this, that's a professional error on their part. If they're doing the search now as part of the closing process, they'll find it." She looked at me. Either way, Miss Holt, I want to be direct with you about your legal position. Under Texas property law, joint tenancy with right of survivorship means that upon your father's death, his interest in the property transferred to you automatically. Not through his will, not through probate. Automatically, by operation of law. The property is yours. Your mother has a right to continue residing there as a surviving spouse, depending on how homestead law applies, but she does not have ownership. Your sister has no ownership interest whatsoever, and the pending sale cannot close without your signature on the deed of sale. I sat with that for a moment. They don't know any of this, I said. Apparently not. She leaned back slightly. What do you want to do? It was the right question. It was the same question Claire Ewan had asked Nora in a different story in a different city, and it was the right question then too. Because what you want is the thing that determines every subsequent decision, and if you do not know what you want, you will make the subsequent decisions incorrectly, no matter how much legal leverage you have. I had been thinking about the answer since the night before, not the strategic answer. What move gets me what outcome? The real answer. What did I actually want? I don't want to destroy my family, I said. My mother is 63 years old, and she is living in a house that is too big for her, and she misses my father every day. I understand why she wants to sell. I understand why Diane is managing this. I'm not trying to stop a sale that makes sense for my mother. I stopped. Captain Nair waited. I want to have been asked, I said. That's the thing. I want to have been a person who got consulted, not informed after, not kept in the loop, actually asked. And I want whatever happens next to happen with my full knowledge and participation. I want my name to be in the room, not just on the deed. She looked at me for a moment. Then she wrote something on the legal pad and turned it toward me. It said notification letter. Confirm ownership, assert signature requirement, invite negotiation. That's what I'd recommend, she said. Would send a formal notice to the listing agent and to any attorney representing the family in the sale. Do you know if they have one? Diane is an attorney, I said. Real estate, primarily. Something moved in Captain Nair's expression. Brief, controlled. Then we send it to Diane directly, in her capacity as either the family's representative or the co-managing party of the sale, and to the title company. The notice states that you are aware of the pending closing, that you are the sole owner of record, following your father's death, and that your written authorization is required before any transfer can proceed. She paused. It does not threaten. It does not demand. It simply states what is legally true and invites a conversation about how to proceed. What happens if they try to close anyway? They won't be able to. The title company will not insure a transaction with a known ownership dispute on record. No title insurance means no closing. No closing means the okayfers walk. She let that sit for a moment. The goal is not to blow up the sale. The goal is to make sure you are part of how it proceeds. I nodded. How long does the letter take? I can have a draft to you by end of day Friday. You review it, we make any changes, it goes out Monday. It was Thursday morning, March 7th. The closing was May 14th. 67 days away. One more thing, I said. I reached into the envelope and took out the second document I had printed. The Texas Joint Tenancy Summary. I want to understand something about the survivorship provision. If I am now the sole owner, what is my mother's legal status in the property? Captain Nair took the printout. She read the relevant section. Texas homestead law would give her the right to continue residing there as a surviving spouse even without ownership interest, so she cannot be removed from the property. But she does not have the authority to sell it. That authority belongs solely to you. She set the page down. Your father structured this carefully. The survivorship provision protected you from being excluded from the asset while still allowing your mother to live in the house during her lifetime, if that's what you chose. I looked at the whiteboard behind her. 3 case references in blue marker, partially erased. I thought about my father's whiteboard in the garage. The one I had never seen, but Walter had described to me once. The one where he planned projects before he built them, where he worked out the dimensions and the materials list before he ever picked up a tool. He had planned this. Not obsessively, not manipulatively, just carefully. The way he planned everything. He had looked at his family and understood something about the shape of it. About the daughter who was always somewhere else, and the daughter who was always present, and the way those two facts would eventually interact. And he had built something that accounted for it. He had built me a foundation. He had just not told me it was there. "Thank you, Captain Nair," I said. "We'll talk Friday," she said. I walked back across the base in the March cold. The sky was the flat white of a day that had decided not to commit to either sun or rain. I passed the motor pool, the commissary, the cluster of administrative buildings that all looked the same. A group of junior enlisted soldiers were doing PT on the far side of the parade ground, their breath visible in the cold. I thought about what happened next. Not on Friday, when the draft letter would be ready. Not on Monday, when it would go out. But in the 7 days between Monday and May 14th. What that period would look like. What Diane would do when the letter arrived. What my mother would say. What Glenn Carver's face would do. I had learned, in 12 years of military intelligence, that the period between an action and its consequence is the most important period in any operation. It is the period when the other party responds, and the response tells you more about the situation than any amount of advance analysis. You do not fully understand a situation until you have introduced a variable and watched what happens. The letter was the variable. I was going to watch what happened. The draft arrived in my inbox on Friday afternoon, March 8, 2024, at 4:22 p.m. It was 2 pages. Captain Nair had written it in the clear, declarative language of legal correspondence. No flourishes, no accusations, no emotional content whatsoever. It stated the facts the joint tenancy created August 7, 2019, the survivorship provision, the automatic transfer upon Walter Holt's death, March 4, 2021. The current ownership of record, Margaret Ellen Holt, sole owner. The pending sale, case number obtained from public Travis County records. The requirement for the owner's written authorization before any transfer could proceed. And a single closing line: Ms. Holt is available to discuss the matter and invites all parties to contact her through the office of Captain Priya Nair, J.H. Corps, Wiesbaden Garrison, at the contact information listed below. I read it twice. I changed 2 words, not legal words, just phrasing that felt slightly off from how I would say something. Captain Nair approved the changes in 20 minutes. I sent back one message. She sent it Monday, March 11, 2024. Certified mail to Travis County Title Company, Round Rock, Texas. Email to Diane Holt Carver, Attorney at Law, Holt Carver Legal, Cedar Park, Texas. Email CC to Glenn Carver, Carver Realty, Cedar Park, Texas. The letters went out at 9 a.m. Central Time, which was 4 p.m. in Wiesbaden. I was in a briefing at 4 p.m. The briefing ran until 6. I came out and checked my phone. 12 missed calls, 5 from Diane, 3 from my mother, 2 from a number I did not recognize, which I assumed was Glenn, 1 from a number with a Round Rock area code, which I assumed was someone at Travis County Title, 1 from Diane again. I looked at all 12. I put my phone in my pocket. I went to the commissary and got dinner, meatloaf and green beans, and a roll that was slightly stale. The standard Tuesday offering. And I sat at a table by the window and ate it while it was still warm. This was not coldness. I want to be accurate about that. It was not cruelty or indifference or the performance of someone who wants to be seen not caring. It was the specific discipline of a person who understands that the first hours after an action are not the right hours to respond. The first hours are when the other party is reacting, not thinking. When the calls are coming from the reactive place. The place of surprise and confusion, and the urgent need to make the thing stop. Responding in those hours would mean entering a conversation that was not yet a conversation. It would mean receiving the reaction and trying to turn it into a dialogue, before the reaction had finished happening. I had learned this in interview training. You ask a question. You wait. You let the silence do work. You do not fill the silence with another question because the silence is not empty. It is full of the other person deciding what to say. And that decision is the information you are waiting for. The phone calls were silence, in this context. They were the other party deciding what to say. I was waiting for them to decide. After dinner, I called Captain Nair. They've been trying to reach me, I said. They've been trying to reach me too, she said. Diane Holt. Carver called this office 4 times between 2 and 5 p.m. She left one message. I haven't returned it yet. I wanted to talk to you first. What did the message say? She said there must be some misunderstanding, and she would like to discuss it at the earliest opportunity. I thought about that phrase. A misunderstanding. It was the word people used when a situation had become inconveniently clear and they needed time to find a different word for it. There's no misunderstanding, I said. No, Captain Nair agreed. There isn't. What do you recommend? Give it 48 hours. Let the title company respond formally. They will. They have a professional obligation to. Let Diane and your family have time to understand the legal situation fully. Then we respond, through this office, to whatever they put forward. No direct contact between you and your family until we understand what position they're going to take. Understood, I said. I went back to my room. I did my evening routine. Shower, uniform prep for the morning, the small maintenance tasks that military life organizes around. I made a cup of tea on the small electric kettle I kept on the windowsill. I sat in the plastic chair and looked out the window at the Wiesbaden evening, which was cold and clear, a change from the weeks of gray, the first real stars visible above the base perimeter. My phone was on the desk. It had not rung since 7 p.m. Either Diane had stopped calling, or she had been advised to stop calling, which suggested she had found her own legal counsel. Which was the logical thing to do and also told me something about how she was framing the situation. Not as a family matter. As a legal one. Good. Legal matters had legal resolutions. Legal resolutions produced documents. Documents I understood, over the following 5 weeks. The situation developed with the specific, measured pace of a legal process conducted by competent people on both sides who understood that speed was not the priority. The okay for closing was postponed. David and Chris Okafor were informed by Glenn Carver that an ownership question had arisen and the closing would be delayed pending resolution. They were disappointed, but not yet walking. They had found the house they wanted, and they were willing to wait a reasonable amount of time for a resolution, which Glenn had characterized to them as a paperwork matter that would be cleared up shortly. Glenn was wrong about shortly, but he was not wrong that it would be cleared up. Diane retained a property attorney named Marcus Webb, Austin, Texas. Webb sent a letter to Captain Nair on March 19 arguing that the joint tenancy had been created without my mother's knowledge or consent and might therefore be challengeable under Texas community property law. Captain Nair consulted with a Texas licensed JAG affiliate and responded on March 26 with a detailed rebuttal. The property had been Walter Holt's separate property, purchased before the marriage, and the community property argument did not apply. Webb took 4 days to respond. His response was shorter than his first letter. My mother called me on March 22. I answered this time. She did not start with the legal situation. She started with, I don't understand what's happening. Maggie. She said it the way she said things when she was genuinely confused rather than strategically confused, with a plainness that my mother was capable of, underneath the management of the day, today, in moments when she was not performing anything for anyone. I know, Mom, I said. I'm sorry it came this way. Why didn't you just call me? I thought about how to answer that. About the hand planes. About things are finally moving forward. About 36 months of OK sent into a group chat. About a March 6th message that put a closing date in the same paragraph as I miss your father every day. Because I needed to understand what I was holding before I said anything. I said. Dad left me something. I needed time to understand what it meant. My mother was quiet for a moment. Diane says it might not be legal? Diane's attorney says it might be challengeable. I said. That's different from not being legal. Captain Nair believes the document is solid. I believe the document is solid. What do you want, Maggie? She asked it the way Captain Nair had asked it. The way Claire Ewan had asked it. The way every competent person eventually asks the only question that matters. I want to be part of what happens to Dad's house. I said. That's all. I want to be in the room. She was quiet again. A longer quiet this time. He never told me he did that, she said. Put your name on it. I know. He should have told me. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he knew how it would go if he told everyone at once. Maybe he just wanted it done. She made a sound that was not quite a response. Something between acknowledgement and the specific tiredness of a woman who had been managing a legal situation she did not choose for 2 weeks, and who was 60, 3 years old, and missed her husband, and had not signed up for any of this. I love you, Mom, I said. I love you too, she said. We hung up. I sat with that call for a while. With the specific weight of loving people who have hurt you, and of having hurt them without intending to, and of the way a single document filed in August of 2019 had done more to reorganize the geometry of my family than anything that had been said in 36 months of phone calls and group chats and careful, managed informings. My father had known that too, I thought. He had known the document would do more than any conversation. That was why he had chosen the document. April moved slowly, the way time moves when you are waiting for something that has a fixed date. May 14th remained on the calendar, postponed now. The O'Keefers extending their patience by another 30 days, while Webb and Captain Nair exchanged letters, and the title company held the file open, and Diane stopped calling me directly after March 22nd and communicated entirely through Marcus Webb. On April 17, 2024, Webb sent a new letter. It was different in tone from the first two, less argumentative, more exploratory. It asked, on behalf of his clients, whether Ms. Holt would be open to discussing a resolution that allowed the sale to proceed on terms acceptable to all parties. Captain Nair brought me into her office the following morning. This is the letter you've been waiting for, she said. I read it. They want to negotiate. They want to sell the house. The O'Keefers are still interested, but they won't wait forever. Diane knows she can't close without you. Your mother knows it. Glenn has told them the commission is at risk. She paused. What do you want the resolution to look like? I had been thinking about this. Not in the way you think about a victory. What do I get? How much? What is my leverage? In the way you think about an ending. What does the ending need to look like in order to be something you can live with? What does it need to say, in the permanent record of this family's story, about who was considered and who was not and whether the record was eventually corrected? I want to be present at the closing, I said. Not by phone, in person, or by written authorization that I provide directly to the title company. Not through Glenn, not through Diane, directly. I want my name on the closing documents as the authorizing owner. And I stopped. Take your time, Captain Nair said. My father's tools, the Stanley planes. 3 of them. They went to a man from his woodworking club in October of 2021. I want to know who has them. I paused. I know that's not a legal thing. She looked at me for a moment. No, she said. It's not. I know. She wrote it down anyway. The negotiation took 11 days. Webb and Captain Nair exchanged 4 more letters. The resolution that emerged was simple, which was appropriate. Simple things are usually the ones that hold. I would provide written authorization for the sale to proceed. The closing documents would reflect my authorization and my ownership history. A letter, prepared by Captain Nair, would be placed in the closing file, noting the transfer of ownership upon Walter Holt's death and my authorization of the subsequent sale. The proceeds would go to my mother, all of them, which I had specified. Because I did not want my mother's financial security and my legal standing to be in competition with each other. What I had wanted was never the money. And Diane would find out what had happened to the Stanley planes. She called me on April 29th. She had found them. The man from the woodworking club, a retired teacher named Paul Greer, who lived 6 blocks from the Briarwood Lane house, had them in his workshop. He had used them. They were good planes. He had told Diane, the best kind, the kind a person who knew what they were doing had maintained for years. Diane told me all of this in a flat, careful voice. The voice of someone reporting information they have been asked to report and who is doing it correctly without editorializing. When she finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He said he'd sell them back." I thought about my father. About 40 years of careful maintenance. About a can of mineral oil and a sharpening stone, and the specific attention required to keep a hand plane in the condition that made it worth using rather than merely owning. "Tell him I don't want to buy them back," I said. "Tell him they're his. Tell him my father would have wanted them used." Deanne was quiet. "Okay," she said. One word. The same word I had sent into the group chat for 3 years. But from her, this time. In a different register entirely. The closing was rescheduled for May 28, 2024. Not the 14th. Not the original date that could not happen. 2 weeks later, with new documents. With my written authorization. With my name in the right place on the right paperwork. The O'Keffers had agreed to wait. Karen Delgado at Travis County Title had reconfigured the closing file. Captain Nair had prepared the authorization letter herself, had it notarized at the base, and had it sent directly to the title company by certified mail. On May 27th, the evening before the closing, I sat on my cot in Wiesbaden and thought about what the next morning would look like in Cedar Park, Texas, 7 hours behind me. The O'Keffers arriving, Karen Delgado at her desk, Glenn Carver, who had spent 11 weeks in a professional situation, had cost him sleep and probably some client relationships and a commission that had been in doubt for so long he had perhaps stopped being certain it would arrive. I thought about my mother in the Briarwood Lane house, which she would be leaving the next day for the last time as its resident. I thought about what that felt like. Not what I thought it should feel like. What it actually felt like for a woman of 63 to walk out of the house, where she had raised her daughters and built her life and lost her husband, carrying whatever she was carrying. I took out the envelope. I did not open it this time. I just held it. The paper was soft now from being handled. The fold lines deep from 3 years of being in a bag. My father's handwriting on the outside was as clear as it had ever been. He had pressed firmly when he wrote. He always had. I thought about August 7th, 2019, a Tuesday, probably. My father, in a button-down shirt and good shoes, because he dressed up for official occasions, even minor ones, standing at a counter in a government building in Travis County, filling out paperwork with his careful, deliberate print. A clerk processing the document. A recorder's stamp. Filed. Done. And then my father driving home to Briarwood Lane and making coffee and sitting on the back porch with his evening coffee. And not telling anyone, and not needing to, because the thing that needed doing was done, and the rest was not his to manage. He had been a man of very few unnecessary words. The closing was in 11 hours. I put the envelope away. I turned off the desk lamp. Outside, Wiesbaden was quiet. And in Cedar Park, Texas, in the house on Briarwood Lane, the last night was passing the way last nights do. Not with drama, not with ceremony, just with the specific silence of a place that has held a life for a long time and is now, in the morning, going to begin the process of holding a different one. My father had built that house to last. He had built me the same way. Tomorrow, the record would say so. The closing happened at 10 o'clock in the morning on May 28, 2024. I was not there. I want to say that plainly. Because the story of what happened in that conference room at Travis County Title Company in Round Rock, Texas, is not a story about my presence in it. I was 4,000 miles away. I was at my desk in Wiesbaden at 5 in the afternoon, finishing an intelligence summary that needed to be on my commanding officer's desk by 6. I was doing my job. I was doing it carefully, the way I always did it, because the work in front of me was real and required my attention, regardless of what was happening in a conference room in Texas that I had already done everything I could do to address. This is one of the things I want you to understand about what happened. The confrontation was not a scene. There was no table I walked into. There was no moment where I stood in a room and watched someone's face change when they understood what was happening. That is a version of this story that would be more satisfying in a certain way, more cinematic, more complete in the frame. But it is not what happened. What happened was quieter than that. And I have come to believe that the quiet version is the more accurate one. Not just for this story, but as a description of how things actually resolve when they resolve correctly. Here is what I know about May 28th from Karen Delgado, who called me at 5:40, 7 p.m. Wiesbaden time, which was 10:40, 7 a.m. in Texas, 47 minutes after the closing began. David and Kristen O'Kafer had arrived at 9:50. They were a couple in their late 30s. David was a software engineer. Kristen was a high school biology teacher, and they had been looking for a house in Cedar Park for 14 months, and had lost 2 other offers before the Briarwood Lane house came available. They were, by Karen's description, quietly thrilled and trying not to show it, which is the particular emotional posture of people who have wanted something for a long time and are finally in the room where it might actually happen. Glenn Carver arrived at 9:55. He was in a good suit, and he shook everyone's hand, and he set his briefcase on the table with the specific decisiveness of a man who had been waiting for this morning for 11 weeks, and who was very ready for it to go smoothly. My mother did not come to the closing. This had been decided in the week before. She had told Diane she did not want to be there, that she had said her goodbyes to the house already, that she did not need to sit at a table and sign documents in order to close a chapter that had already been closing in her for a long time. Diane had accepted this. I had accepted it when Captain Nair told me. I understood it completely. My mother's relationship to that house was not a legal matter. It was not a document. It was not something that required her signature or her presence to be real. She had already done what she needed to do, in private, in her own time, in whatever way people do those things when the audience is just themselves and the house and the absence it contains. Diane was there. She arrived at 10 o'clock exactly. Diane had always been punctual. It was one of the things I genuinely respected about her. The respect for other people's time. The implicit statement that your commitments are real and you take them seriously. She sat across from Glenn at the conference table. She had a leather portfolio in front of her. She did not look at Glenn when she sat down. She looked at Karen Delgado. Karen Delgado, who had called me on a Tuesday night in November from a Texas number I did not recognize, who had done her job correctly when it would have been easy to miss what she found, who had initiated the chain of events that had led to this morning being what it was rather than what it would have been. Karen opened the closing file and distributed the documents. On the top of the stack, before the deed of sale and the settlement statement and the title insurance commitment, was a single page. Captain Nair's letter. Authorization and ownership history. It stated, in the plain declarative language of legal correspondence, that Margaret Ellen Holt was the owner of record of 4 Briarwood Lane, Cedar Park, Texas, and that she had authorized the sale to David and Kristen O'Kafer to proceed, and that the proceeds of the sale were to be distributed to Beverly Ruth Holt as specified in the attached authorization agreement. At the bottom of the page, my signature. Notarized at Wiesbaden Garrison, May 23, 2024. Karen told me later that when she placed the stack of documents on the table, Diane picked up the authorization letter first. She read it. She set it down. She did not say anything. She picked up her pen and began reviewing the next document in the stack. Glenn Carver looked at the letter for longer than Diane did. Karen said his face went through several things in about 15 seconds. She described it as the face of a man doing a calculation he had not known he would need to do. Then he set it down too, and picked up his pen, and the closing proceeded. It took 41 minutes. The O'Kiffers signed everything with the focused attention of people who are trying to read carefully, and also trying not to cry, which Karen said was one of her favorite things about her job. The people who had been looking for a long time, and were finally here. David O'Kaffer shook everyone's hand at the end. Kristen O'Kaffer asked Karen if it was strange to do this all day. Be present for the moment when people's lives changed. And Karen said she had been doing it for 16 years, and she still had not decided whether it was strange, or simply what certain people were built for. Glenn Carver left first. His commission was $21,340, slightly less than the $22,000 he had originally calculated because of the adjusted closing timeline costs. He had been waiting 11 weeks for that number. He took it and left without additional conversation, which I respect. There is a kind of professionalism in knowing when a situation is fully resolved and not adding to it. Diane left second. She stopped at the door of the conference room and turned back, Karen told me. She looked at the authorization letter, still on the table where Karen had collected it back into the file. She stood at the door for a moment. Then she said, to no one in particular, she didn't have to give Mom the proceeds. Karen said she did not respond, because it was not her statement to respond to. Diane left. Karen called me at 5:40, 7 p.m. my time, as I said, which was 10:47 a.m. Texas time. She told me everything I have just told you. Then she said, the wire transfer to your mother's account will process by end of business today. $468,720. After fees and commissions. Thank you, Karen, I said. Thank you for calling me back, she said. That night in November. I thought about that Tuesday night. The cold coffee. The rain on the window. The envelope on my knee with the stiff paper that had been folded for 3 years. You did your job right, I said. That's what started everything. She laughed. A brief, genuine laugh. Take care of yourself, Miss Holt. I hung up. I finished the intelligence summary. I sent it to my commanding officer's inbox at 6 p.m. exactly. Then I sat at my desk for a while, with nothing in particular in front of me, which was unusual, and which I allowed because I thought the moment probably deserved it. Outside the window, Wiesbaden was in the particular golden light of a late May evening. The light that only happens for about 3 weeks, in spring, when the angle of the sun through northern European air turns everything briefly warm and specific. The light that makes you understand why people have been painting this part of the world for centuries. The base looked different in that light. Not better or worse, just more itself. I thought about 4 Briarwood Lane. Not what it had been. I had thought about that enough. In enough parking lots and motor pools, and late evenings on a cot in various rooms in various countries. I thought about what it was now. A house that the O'Kaffers were going to drive to tomorrow morning with their keys, and their boxes, and their 14 months of wanting it, and their particular vision of the life they were going to build inside it. A house that was going to be a different family's house. That was going to hold different sounds, different meals, different arguments about where to put the couch and whether the guest room should be a guest room or something else. It was going to be full of different people. My father had built it to hold a life. It was going to hold a life. Just not the life he had imagined when he built it. That seemed, in the late May light, like the right outcome. Not a sad one. Just the right one. My phone rang, Texas number. My mother. I answered. It's done, she said. I know, Karen called. Maggie. She said my name the way she said it sometimes. With a weight that was not quite grief, and not quite love, and not quite apology, but contained elements of all 3. I've been sitting here trying to figure out what to say to you. You don't have to say anything, Mom. I want to. She was quiet for a moment. What you did. Giving me the proceeds. You didn't have to do that. I know. Why did you? I thought about how to answer truthfully. Not satisfyingly, truthfully. The truthful answer was not about generosity. It was not about forgiveness, not exactly. It was about something more specific than either of those. Because the money was never the point, I said. The house was never the point, not really. What I needed was for my name to be in the right place on the right document. For the record to be accurate. For someone to have had to notice that I was part of this family before they could proceed. I paused. Dad gave me that. He gave it to me in 2019 and I didn't know I had it until November. But he gave it to me. That's what mattered. My mother was quiet for a long time. He knew, she said finally. Not as an accusation. As a recognition. The particular tone of a woman understanding her husband, years after the fact, in a way she had not understood him when he was alive. He knew, I said. He never said anything to me about it. No. He should have. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he was doing what he always did. Building the thing that needed to be built and trusting it to work when it was needed. My mother made a sound that was not quite a laugh. That sounds exactly like him. It does. We talked for 22 minutes. Not about the house, not about Diane. Not about the legal process or the letters, or the 11 weeks between the first notice and the closing. We talked about my father. About specific things. The deck he had built in 2003, the way he took his coffee, the Tom Clancy novels he read in the parking lot. The workbench in the workshop. The Stanley planes, which were with Paul Greer now, being used, which my father would have considered the correct outcome. At the end, my mother said, "When are you coming home?" I thought about home. About what the word meant now, without the house on Briarwood Lane to locate it. About Cedar Park and Wiesbaden and Fort Hood, and every other place I had lived for a portion of time, and left, and what any of those places had to do with the word home. September, I said. I have leave in September. I'll be in the apartment by then, she said. She was moving to a two-bedroom in a complex near Diane's house. Smaller, easier, no yard that required a person who was not there. It'll be strange? Strange is okay, I said. Yes, she said. I suppose it is. We said goodnight. I put the phone down. I looked at the window for a while. At the last of the golden light, going out of the Wiesbaden evening, the sky moving through the colors it moves through at the end of a May day in Germany. The amber, the rose, the particular deep blue that comes just before dark. I thought about Diane. She had not called me. Not on the day of the closing, not in the days after. I did not expect her to, not immediately. Diane was a person who processed things privately, and then emerged from the processing with a position, fully formed, and then communicated the position. She was not a person who called in the middle of processing. I understood this about her. I was not holding my breath for the call. It came 12 days later. June 9th. A Sunday evening, Texas time, which made it late Sunday night in Wiesbaden. I was awake. I had been reading one of the Tom Clancy novels I had started keeping, because of my father, because of a parking lot in 2012, and a man who had waited 2 hours in a car to drive his daughter home. Diane's name on the screen. I answered. She said, "Hey," I said, a pause, not uncomfortable. Just the pause of two people who have been in a complicated situation together for a long time and are taking a moment to locate the ground before stepping onto it. "I've been thinking about what to say," she said. "I've been thinking about it for almost 2 weeks." "Take your time," I said. She did. Several seconds. "I didn't know about the deed," she said. "I want to be clear about that. It wasn't a scheme, Maggie. I genuinely didn't know he had done that. I thought the house was Mom's. I thought I was helping Mom with something that was hers to decide." "I know," I said. "Do you?" "Yes, and I did." This was the thing I had come to understand in the 11 weeks between the letter and the closing. That the particular failure of what had happened was not the failure of bad intentions. It was the failure of incomplete information, combined with the quiet, accumulated assumption that the person who was present knew better than the person who was not. Diane had not tried to steal anything. She had managed a situation she believed was hers to manage, because no one, not my father, not the deed, not the Travis County Recorder's office, had told her otherwise until Captain Nair's letter arrived on a Monday morning in March. I should have asked you, Diane said, about the house, before any of it. I should have called you when we first started talking about selling and said. I should have asked what you wanted. I sat with that for a moment. With the specific weight of hearing from my sister the sentence I had needed to hear for 3 years. Not the legal acknowledgement. The human one. The recognition that the question should have been asked. That I should have been in the room. Yes, I said. You should have. I'm sorry, she said. It was a real apology. I could tell the difference. I had heard enough of both kinds, in 12 years of a life that required distinguishing between them. It was not the apology that is really a request for something. It was not the apology that comes with conditions or redirections, or a subtle pivot to what the other person also did wrong. It was just the thing itself, plainly said. Meant thank you, I said. We talked for an hour. Not about the legal situation. That was over, fully resolved. Filed and closed and recorded. We talked about our father. About things I had not known, and she had not known that we learned, separately, from the different vantage points of our different relationships with him. She told me he had talked about me more than I had known. That he had mentioned my promotions, my deployments, specific things I had said on phone calls, that he had reported to her without telling me he was doing so. That he had kept a photograph on his workbench, not in the house, in the workshop. A photograph of me at Fort Hood in 2018, in uniform, that she had found when she cleaned out the workshop, and that she had kept without telling anyone. I can send it to you, she said. Yes, I said, please. It arrived 2 weeks later, in a padded envelope with a Cedar Park return address. A 4x6 print, slightly faded. The corners soft from being handled. Me in front of a Humvee, squinting against the Texas sun, grinning at whoever was behind the camera. I looked young. I was 28. I did not remember the photograph being taken, which meant it had been taken by someone who was just there, just catching a moment that was not trying to be anything. My father had kept it on his workbench. For 6 years. I put it in my field bag. Front pocket. With the envelope. With the deed. Here is what I know now that I did not know. When I sat in a recruiter's office at 22 and signed my name on a different kind of document. I know that the people who love you are not always the people who see you. Seeing requires presence, and presence is not always possible. And the absence that accumulates in the space between people who love each other can harden, over time, into assumption. The assumption that the one who is not here does not need to be asked. That the one who chose a different life has relinquished the right to the decisions that stay behind. That love, which is real, is sufficient evidence of consideration, which is different from love and requires its own separate acts. My family loved me. They did not always consider me. I had let this go on for 3 years without naming it, because naming it would have required a confrontation I did not know how to have. And because the thing that would have allowed me to name it, the deed, my father's document, the legal fact of my place in that house, was sitting in a filing cabinet at the Travis County Recorder's office, and in a folded envelope in my bag, waiting for the moment when someone looked. My father had known that certain truths require a document. Not because the truth is not true without one, but because a document is what makes a truth legible to people who have decided not to look. A document does not argue. It does not raise its voice. It does not need to be believed. It simply exists, in the specific way that recorded things exist. Permanently, retrievably, attached to a case number that can be pulled at any time by anyone who knows to look. He had created a document. He had put my name on it. And then he had let the document do what documents do, which is wait. I know that the distance between people is not always physical. I have been physically distant from my family for 12 years. stationed in countries they could not easily visit, in time zones that required calculation, doing work they could not fully picture. But the distance that mattered was not that distance. The distance that mattered was the one that accumulates when a person is repeatedly informed rather than consulted, when their name appears in group chats rather than conversations, when their presence is acknowledged but their participation is not required. That distance is not geographical. It is structural. It is built, piece by piece, out of small decisions made by people who mean well and who have decided, without quite saying so, that the person who is not here has opted out. I had not opted out. I had just not known how to say so in a way that would be heard. My father had said it for me, in August of 2019, in a government office, in the specific, binding language of a legal instrument. I know that the person you become after something like this is not a different person from who you were before. I am still the same person who sat in a recruiter's office at 22 and signed her name on a document that would determine the shape of the next 12 years. I am still the person who chose distance, who has been somewhere else for most of her adult life, who has missed things that cannot be unmissed, and will continue to miss things because the life I chose requires that cost, and I have made peace with the cost. But I am also now the person who knows what she carries. In my bag, in the front pocket, there is an envelope. Inside it a document, 2 pages, my name on the second page. My father's signature beside mine. Not quite, not exactly, he signed as grantor rather than grantee. But close enough that when I look at it I can see his hand there, the deliberate careful pressure of a man who believed that what you put your name to should be legible and should last. It has lasted. I know that silence is not the same as absence. For 12 years, my father said very little to me about what I meant to him. He drove me to a recruiter's office and read a Tom Clancy novel in the parking lot. He made coffee in a green thermos and asked a question about frequency and water on a Skype call. He said good, and be safe, and a handful of other things that were small and exact and that I have been assembling into a complete picture for 3 years now. The way you assemble a picture that was never displayed all at once but was always, in its pieces, entirely coherent. The last piece was August 7th, 2019, a Tuesday afternoon. A government office, a clerk, a recorder's stamp. Margaret Ellen Holt, co-owner. He did not tell me. He did not need to tell me. He just needed it to be true, and documented, and filed in the right place. He trusted the system to work. He trusted me to know what to do when it did. He was right on both counts. Here is what I want to leave you with, because I have been thinking about it since May 28th, since the closing that happened, without me in a room 4,000 miles away, while I finished an intelligence summary at my desk, in Wiesbaden. Your presence is not always the point. I mean this specifically. I mean it for the person who is always somewhere else, who is deployed or relocated, or simply far, who has chosen a life that places them repeatedly outside the room where the decisions are made. Your presence is not always the point. What is always the point is the record. Whether the record reflects you accurately. Whether your name is in the right place on the right document. Whether someone, when they look closely enough, will find you there. My father understood this. He spent 40 years building things that did not require his presence to function. A deck that held for 20 years. A workshop built on 4 consecutive Saturdays that stood until someone decided to clear it. Cabinets in a kitchen that are, at this moment, someone else's cabinets now, and that are still solid, still exactly the right wood for the job, still a record of the person who built them even though that person is not there. He built me the same way. Not to require his presence. To be solid on my own. To hold up. And then, in August of 2019, he went to a government office and made sure the record said so. I have been thinking about what it means to be loved the way my father loved me. Not the loud kind of love, not the kind that announces itself and expects acknowledgement. The kind that prepares, that anticipates, that builds something in advance of the moment, when it will be needed, without knowing the shape of the moment, without needing to know. That trusts the person it is for to be capable of using what is given when the time is right. I think that is the most sophisticated form of love. It is also the loneliest for the person giving it. My father sat with a secret for 3 years. He knew something about my place in his family that no one else knew, and he said nothing. And he trusted the document to say it when the time came. He was right to trust it. I am going to Cedar Park in September. My mother will be in her apartment by then, the two-bedroom near Diane's house, small and manageable, and without a yard. I will stay with her for 10 days, which is longer than I have stayed anywhere in Cedar Park since March of 2021. We will probably visit the house. Not to go inside, just to drive past. The way you drive past places that have been reorganized out of your life into someone else's. I want to see if the deck is still there. My father built it in 2003 on 4 consecutive Saturdays. He used the right wood and he took his time. 21 years is long enough to know whether something was built to hold. I think it was. I think it is. If this story found you in a moment of distance, if you are the one who is always somewhere else, who gets the group chats and the Zillow links and the we wanted to keep you in the loop, hear this. The distance is real. The cost of it is real. The things you miss are missed and cannot be unmissed. That is true, and it is yours to carry, and I am not going to tell you it is not heavy. But distance is not disappearance. Your name is still your name. The record is still the record. And the people who loved you correctly, the ones who built things that lasted, who went quietly to the right offices and put your name in the right places before they left. Those people left something behind that the distance cannot reach. Find out what it is. Make sure you know what you are carrying. Because the document does not expire. It just waits. And when the moment comes, when someone does their job correctly on a Tuesday afternoon and finds your name in a place no one expected it to be, you want to be ready. My father made sure I was ready. I am. Take care of yourselves. Know what you are carrying. And if someone has put your name somewhere you did not know to look, look. It will still be there. I'll see you in the next one.